There is a 22-year-old kid named Aaron Reed who works 50 hours a week at an Amazon warehouse near Nashville, making $21 an hour. After his shift, he goes back to his mother's Hyundai SUV. He sleeps in the back seat. His mom sleeps in the front. Their black lab named Stella lays between them. That is his home. He has a full-time job, 50 hours a week, and he lives in a car. There is a woman named Celeste, a single mother of 3, who worked up to 3 jobs at a time. She started a food business from her home. An arsonist destroyed her rental house. The private equity firm that owned the building still demanded 2 months' rent and kept her security deposit. Then she was diagnosed with ovarian and breast cancer. Now she cycles through motels and shelters. She has 3 jobs and cancer and no home. There is a 67-year-old woman who worked retail for 33 years. She says the company eliminated her position right before her retirement so they would not have to pay her full pension. She is now homeless. After 33 years of showing up every single day. This was never supposed to happen in America. This country was built on a promise. You work hard, you show up, you play by the rules, and the system takes care of you. That promise is broken. Not cracked, not bent, broken. Right now in the United States, between 40 and 60% of people experiencing homelessness have a job. They are plumbers, and factory workers, and casino supervisors, and pizzeria managers. They deliver your groceries, they sell you eyeglasses, they unload trucks at Amazon, and they cannot afford a roof over their heads. There is not a single county, not a single state in this entire country where a full-time worker earning minimum wage can afford a modest 2-bedroom apartment. At minimum wage, you would have to work 86 hours a week to afford a 1-bedroom. 86 hours. And rent has outpaced income gains by 325% since 1985. The United States had a surplus of 300,000 affordable homes in 1970. Today, there are only 37 affordable homes available for every 100 extremely low-income renters. This video is going to show you 10 things that are happening right now in this country that were never supposed to happen here, not in a third-world country. Here. And by the time we get to number 1, you are going to understand that what we are living through is not a rough patch. It is a fundamental restructuring of who this country works for. And it is not working for you. Working Americans are becoming homeless, and nobody is talking about it. The warning signs are already here. Most people just are not reading them. And this one is the one that should shake every single person watching this video to their core. Homelessness in America just hit a record high, and for the first time in modern history, the fastest growing segment of people without homes are people with jobs, not people with addiction, not people with mental illness, people with jobs. The Washington Post did a massive investigation, and what they found is staggering. Shelter administrators across the country are reporting a spike in first-timers who are employed. In Tulsa, where homelessness rose 26% in a single year, the number one reason people gave for being homeless was not substance abuse. It was not mental health. It was the lack of affordable housing. And a researcher named Margot Kuschel at UC San Francisco said it plainly. She said, "We are pushing working people into homelessness because they just cannot afford the rent." And when you look at the numbers, you can see exactly why. The National Low-Income Housing Coalition calculated that a household needs to earn an average of $46,967 a year, or $23 an hour, just to afford a 2-bedroom apartment at fair market rent. The federal minimum wage is still $7.25 an hour. It has not been raised since 2009, that is 17 years. And even in cities with a higher minimum wage, the math still does not work. A journalist named Brian Goldstone spent 6 years reporting on this crisis, and he wrote something that I think should be tattooed on the forehead of every member of Congress. He said in these places, a low-wage job is homelessness waiting to happen. The lightest setback, minor car trouble, disrupted childcare, a brief illness, can be disastrous. His book was named one of the 10 best books of 2025 by the New York Times and praised by former President Obama. And what he found is that the homelessness we see on the street is just the tip of the iceberg. There is an entire shadow realm of homelessness that has been rendered invisible. People living in their cars, people in roach-infested budget motels, people doubled up on the floor of a relative's overcrowded apartment. He said that official homeless counts underestimate the true number by at least 6 times. And meanwhile, adults over the age of 50 are the fastest-growing segment of people experiencing homelessness. 70% of the lowest-wage households spend more than half their income on rent. More than half of all Americans live paycheck to paycheck and are one crisis away from losing their home. One car repair, one medical bill, one unexpected expense. And the safety net that was supposed to catch people, Programs like TANF now serves approximately one-third as many households as it did in 1996. The net was cut while the cliff got higher. And during the pandemic, when the government actually invested in preventing homelessness through eviction moratoriums, emergency rental assistance, and expanded child tax credits, poverty dropped 45% and homelessness held steady. That proved it was a policy choice. They chose to let it happen, and now they have chosen to let it get worse. If you are over 40, the job market has already decided you are disposable. All right, I need to talk about something that is happening to an enormous number of people watching this video right now, and it is something that almost nobody in media or politics wants to say out loud, because it implicates every major corporation in the country. If you are over 40 years old and you are on the job market, the system has already decided that you are less valuable than someone younger than you. That is not a feeling. That is not paranoia. That is data. ARP just published a new survey in late January 2026, polling over 1,600 workers aged 50 and above, and the results are devastating. 90% of workers over 50 believe that age discrimination against older workers is common in the workplace today. Not some, not a minority opinion. 90% and 64% said they had personally witnessed or experienced it. Corporate America has this list of reasons why workers over 45 are not a fit anymore. They are too expensive. They are overqualified. They are not a culture fit. And what that translates to in practice is that 22% of employees over 40 report that their workplaces skip over older workers for challenging assignments. 16% say they have witnessed a clear pattern of being passed over for promotions in favor of younger employees. And when they do get laid off, the consequences are catastrophic. A Wall Street Journal analysis of the Boston College retirement study found that among Americans between 50 and 65 who were laid off in the past decade, 24% were unable to find a new job at all. 1 in 4. And the ones who do find work take an average 11% wage cut, according to an economist at FTI Consulting. So you spend 25 or 30 years building expertise and experience, and the reward is either unemployment or a demotion. And this is colliding with a retirement crisis that is genuinely terrifying. More than half of Gen X members do not believe they have saved enough money to retire at 65, according to a Northwestern Mutual study. The Transamerica Center estimated that Gen X households have a median of $107,000 saved in retirement accounts. For a retirement that could last 25 or 30 years, that will not go very far. And the median 401k balance for a 65-year-old today is $95,000. After taxes, that is closer to $75,000. That is supposed to fund the rest of your life, and the Social Security Trust Fund that was supposed to be the backstop is projected to go insolvent by 2032. That is 6 years from now. When that happens, benefits face an automatic cut of approximately 23%. For a retired couple making $75,000 a year, that is a loss of over $900 a month. For a single senior making $30,000, that is $350 a month gone, and 77% of older adults in an AARP survey said the 2.8% cost of living adjustment for 2026 is not enough to keep up with rising prices. So their benefits are already falling behind inflation, and the program itself is heading toward a cliff. Nearly 40% of Gen Xers now expect to retire at age 70 or older, or not retire at all. 81% say their current job does not pay enough to make them feel financially secure. And a woman named Taryn, 53, went viral on TikTok simply for saying that she worked full-time her entire life and did not save for retirement. Not because she was irresponsible, because she needed every dollar just to live. And hundreds of thousands of people responded saying that is me too. That was never supposed to happen in this country. You were not supposed to work for 30 or 40 years and end up with nothing. But that is exactly where millions of Americans are right now, and nobody in Washington is even pretending to have a plan. The United States government is borrowing $3 billion a day, and nobody blinked. I want you to sit with a number for a second, because I think it is the most important number in America right now, and almost nobody knows it. The national debt of the United States crossed $39 trillion in March 2026, and the speed at which that happened should genuinely terrify you. The debt hit $38 trillion in late October 2025. That means we added a full $1 trillion in approximately 5 months. 5 months. And that pace is accelerating. The Peterson Foundation projects the debt will hit $40 trillion before this fall's midterm elections, which means another $1 trillion in roughly the same compressed time frame. The last time the United States was adding debt at this speed outside of wartime or an acute financial crisis was never. This has no modern precedent. And I need to break down what this actually means for your life because most people hear 39 trillion and their eyes glaze over. So let me put it in terms you can feel. There are approximately 131 million households in the United States. Divide 39 trillion by 131 million, and every single household's share of the national debt is $289,000. That is more than the median home price in most of this country. You already owe more to the federal government's debt than most homes are worth, and you never signed up for it. And the interest payments alone on this debt are now costing the government $1.04 trillion a year, according to the Congressional Budget Office. That is more than the entire defense budget, more than Medicare, more than Social Security. The fastest growing line item in the federal budget is not a program that helps you. It is the interest on money that was already spent, much of it before you were even born. And by 2036, interest payments are projected to exceed $2 trillion a year, which would be approximately 5% of the entire national economy. The CBO's February 2026 Outlook projects the federal deficit will reach $1.9 trillion this year and swell to $3.1 trillion by 2036. Debt held by the public will surge from 101% of GDP today to 120% by 2036, eclipsing the previous all-time record of 106% set just after World War II. And the head of the Nonpartisan Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, Maya McGuinness, warned that the severity of this could trigger a financial, inflation, or currency crisis. She said the federal budget is desperately in need of a course correction. And you know what happened the day the debt crossed $39 trillion? Nothing. No press conference. No presidential address. No emergency session of Congress. The Treasury Department published it in a daily statement like it was just another row in a spreadsheet. $39 trillion. And the political system's response was silence. Because both parties created this, both parties spent this money, both parties ran these deficits. And neither party has any political incentive to fix it, because the consequences will arrive after the next election. That was never supposed to happen in America. The founders of this country explicitly warned that debt would be the thing that destroys a republic. Alexander Hamilton himself said that the creation of debt should always be accompanied with the means of extinguishment. We have abandoned that principle completely, and the bill is coming due. The war is costing you everything and nobody asked your permission. Here is something that I think needs to be said very clearly. And I think a lot of people are feeling it, but nobody in a position of power is acknowledging it. The war in Iran is destroying the American economy, and you did not get a vote. You did not get a say. You did not get a town hall. You did not get a referendum. Your elected representatives did not even pass a formal declaration of war, which is technically required by the Constitution. And yet this conflict is costing between $500 million and $1 billion a day, according to defense spending analyses. And the ripple effects are hitting every single American household, whether they support the war or not. Gas has crossed $4.08 nationally, the highest since the summer of 2022. In California, it is $5.89. Diesel, which powers every truck that delivers every product you buy, is at $5.40 nationally, and over $7 in California. That represents an increase of more than 40% since the war started in late February. And it is not just the gas pump. The Strait of Hormuz, which Iran closed in response to the U.S. and Israeli strikes, is one of the most critical maritime choke points on Earth. 20% of global oil and approximately one-third of the world's fertilizer ingredients pass through that narrow waterway. Commercial traffic has largely been halted, and Donald Trump has proposed a $1.5 trillion defense budget, which represents a $500 billion increase over the current level. On the same day, he requested a 10% cut to non-defense spending. Think about that for a second. $500 billion more for the war machine. 10% less for everything that actually keeps the country running. Education, infrastructure, housing, veteran services, environmental protection, all cut to fund a conflict in a region 6,000 miles from your front door. And here is the part that should make your blood boil. The Congressional Budget Office forecasted a $1.83 trillion deficit this year before the war spending was even fully factored in. That money has to be borrowed. And you, your children, and your grandchildren will be paying the interest on that borrowing for the rest of your lives. An Alaska prepper video that went viral put it perfectly. He said, "Why would we need an extra $500 billion in military spending for a war that is supposed to last 2 weeks? That math only works if this is not ending anytime soon." And the supply chain analyst quoted in the SHTF Plan article said something that I have been trying to communicate for weeks, and he said it better than I could. He said the pain we are feeling right now is just the initial impact. The tankers that left before the war are still arriving. The products manufactured before the conflict still fill our shelves. We are still eating food that was produced last year. But when those pipelines empty, and they are emptying right now, the second and third and fourth order effects will cascade through manufacturing, packaging, agriculture, transportation, and retail in ways that take months to fully materialize. This war was never supposed to happen. The American people were promised no new wars. And now we have one that is costing $1 billion a day, while people at home are sleeping in their cars and choosing between groceries and health insurance. Your dollar is dying and everything you earn is worth less every month. I want to show you something that I think captures where we actually are as a country, better than any government statistic or Wall Street report. There is a guy on social media who makes $30,000 a month. He has a 7-figure net worth. He owns a home, he has a family, and he made a video saying he feels like he is barely getting by. $30,000 a month. That is $360,000 a year. And in America, in 2026, it feels like it is not enough. Now I know some of you are going to hear that and think that is out of touch or entitled, and I understand that reaction, but I need you to listen past it, because what this tells you is that the problem is not how much you earn. The problem is how little your money buys. Food prices are up 24% since 2020. A bag of baking chips that cost $5.79 last week is $7.39 this week at the same store. A 12-pack of soda is $8. Cereal is outrageous. A bag of Cheetos is $7.29. One woman showed her grocery receipt and it was $681 for what used to cost $215 in 2015. That is not 32% inflation. That is closer to 55 or 65% on the things people actually buy every day. And on top of the grocery bill, your electric bill is exploding. There are 108 million electric customers and 49 million natural gas customers currently seeing increases. A woman in Ohio showed her electric bill at $1,300 for a single month when she used less power than the year before when her bill was $656. A single mother in Alabama is using $48 of electricity per day, and she is choosing between paying her power bill and feeding her child. A woman in New Jersey showed her gas bill at $400, double what it was the year before. And these are not mansions. These are ranch homes, 1,250 square foot brick houses, regular families in regular neighborhoods. And the car payment has become its own crisis. The average monthly car payment in America just hit a record $742. That is approaching $9,000 a year just to drive to work. Insurance has surged 46% in 2 years, with the average American now paying $2,256 a year, and a third of Americans saying their car insurance is straight up unaffordable, and mortgage payments have gone through the roof. The average monthly mortgage payment is now $2,205. A 28-year-old woman showed her mortgage on a starter house at $4,800 a month after it went up $500 in 18 months. She said it feels criminal, and her house is not even her first choice of neighborhood. She bought there because she could not afford anywhere else. And meanwhile, the dollar continues to weaken. Wages have not doubled, but the cost of everything has. A woman on social media put it perfectly. She said America did not get more expensive. Our money just got weaker. Your parents could raise kids, buy a house, take a vacation on one income. Now people have 2 jobs and cannot even pay rent. And a man said something that hit me harder than any data point I have read this year. He said God did not call us here to be wage slaves our entire lives. And when the dollar has lost all of its value, the most sane decision you can make is to just go live your life. That is where we are. People are not just struggling financially, they are questioning the entire premise. They are questioning whether the system itself is worth participating in. And that level of disillusionment was never supposed to exist in America. The largest supply chain disruption in modern history is happening right now, and you are not prepared. I need you to understand something that the mainstream media is covering in fragments, but nobody is putting together in a way that shows you the full picture. What is happening right now with the Strait of Hormuz is not just an oil disruption. It is not just a gas price story. The International Energy Agency, which is the global authority on energy markets, has officially called this the largest supply disruption in the history of the global oil market. In the history of the global oil market, larger than the 1973 Arab oil embargo, larger than the 1979 Iranian Revolution, larger than the 1990 Gulf War. The head of the IEA, Fatih Birol, said those exact words, and the World Economic Forum just published an analysis showing that this crisis extends far beyond oil. it is hitting at least 9 major commodity categories simultaneously: fertilizer, aluminum, sulfur, helium, methanol, iron ore pellets, liquefied petroleum gas, monoethylene glycol, and natural gas. All of these flow through the same narrow waterway that is now effectively closed. Traffic through the strait fell from around 130 ships per day before the crisis to single digits in early March, a decline of more than 95% according to UNCTAD, the UN's Trade and Development Agency. And the timing of this could not possibly be worse. The FAO, the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization, has said there is no more than a 3-month window for action before risks escalate significantly, affecting global planting decisions for 2026 and beyond. Urea prices have already surged 47%, from $470 per ton to $684 per ton at key import hubs. Nitrogen fertilizer prices could roughly double from 2024 levels according to Morningstar, and unlike oil, there are no internationally coordinated strategic fertilizer reserves. There is no emergency stockpile to release. When this supply is cut, it is cut. And the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace published a piece this week that said even if the Strait of Hormuz reopens tomorrow, restarting production and transport for fertilizers could take weeks that Northern Hemisphere farmers do not have. The planting window is closing. The decisions farmers are making right now about how much fertilizer to use and how much to plant will determine the food supply for the rest of this year and into 2027. And every single option they have is bad. Use less fertilizer, lower yields. Switch crops, certain foods become scarce. Plant less, outright shortages. And those shortages do not arrive immediately. The pain cascades. The analyst from SHTF Plan put it perfectly. The tankers that left before the war are still arriving. The products manufactured before the conflict still fill our shelves. We are still eating food that was produced last year. But when those pipelines empty, and they are emptying right now, the second and third and fourth order effects will hit manufacturing, packaging, agriculture, transportation, and retail in ways that take months to fully materialize. This is not a prediction. This is a supply chain timeline, and the clock is already running. The Philippines has already declared a national energy emergency. Sri Lanka has moved to a 4-day workweek. South Korea is asking citizens to save every drop of fuel. European airports are restricting jet fuel refueling. Airlines are canceling flights. New Zealand is giving cash payments to 150,000 families to help them afford fuel. And America is sitting here arguing about whether gas prices are temporary. They are not temporary. The infrastructure that was damaged will take years to rebuild. The supply that was cut will take months to reroute. And the food that was not planted this spring will not magically appear on shelves this fall. America's refineries cannot even process the oil we produce, and nobody told you. Here is something that I guarantee most people watching this video do not know, and it completely changes how you should think about energy security in this country. You have probably heard politicians say that the United States is the world's largest oil producer. And that is technically true. We pump over 13 million barrels a day, and the implication they want you to draw from that is that we are energy independent, that we do not need the Middle East, that we are insulated from what is happening in the Strait of Hormuz. And that is one of the most dangerous misconceptions in America right now, because what we produce and what we can refine are two completely different things. Texas and North Dakota produce lightweight sweet crude. That is what American shale oil is. But roughly 70% of the refinery capacity in this country was built decades ago to process heavy sour crude, which is a completely different grade of oil. That heavy crude comes primarily from the Middle East, Venezuela, and Canada. Think of it like this. You have a fleet of diesel trucks, but you are only producing high-octane racing fuel. The fuel exists, but your machines cannot use it. And for years, we have relied on importing over 1 million barrels a day of heavy crude from Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and Kuwait to keep those refineries running at capacity. When the Strait of Hormuz closed on February 28th, that supply did not just get expensive, it vanished. And this is why the military action in Venezuela earlier this year happened. The administration was trying to replace the Middle Eastern heavy crude flow with Venezuelan supply, but it is not arriving fast enough to fill the gap. And now refineries are starting to limit production, because they are physically running out of the specific crude they were built to process. That is why you are seeing diesel prices at $5.40 nationally and $7 in California, even though we produce more oil than any country on Earth. It is not about total production. It is about refinery compatibility. And the engineers and energy analysts who understand this are raising alarms that nobody in Washington is addressing publicly. Redesigning refinery hardware to run entirely on American light crude would require a massive industrial overhaul that would take years and hundreds of billions of dollars. And in the meantime, every product in this country that moves by truck, which is virtually every product, is getting more expensive by the day because diesel is the lifeblood of the American supply chain. FTR Transportation Intelligence reported that fuel costs per mile for truckers have gone up 21 to 24 cents in just 3 weeks, the largest increase over that time frame on record. Small owner-operators, the independent truckers who move the majority of American freight, are being crushed because they cannot pass those costs on. Many of them are parking their rigs because it costs more to drive than they earn per load. And when trucks stop moving, everything stops. Your groceries, your medicine, your building materials, your Amazon packages. The entire economy runs on diesel, and the diesel supply chain is compromised at a structural level that a tweet from the president cannot fix. This was never supposed to be a vulnerability. America was supposed to be energy independent, and on paper we are. But in reality, our refinery infrastructure is a 50-year-old machine that was built for a world that no longer exists. And nobody invested in upgrading it because the quarterly earnings reports looked fine, until they did not. What is coming for your grocery bill will make everything before this look like a warm-up. I want to be very careful with how I say this because I do not want to fearmonger and I do not want to cause panic. But I also refuse to lie to you. What is building in the food supply chain right now is the most serious threat to American grocery prices that we have seen in our lifetimes. And it is not coming from one direction. It is coming from every direction at the same time. Let me walk you through the chain, and you tell me where the relief is supposed to come from. Fertilizer prices have surged 20 to 47% depending on the product because the Strait of Hormuz, which carries roughly 1/3 of all seaborne fertilizer trade, has been effectively closed for over a month. The Arabian Gulf accounts for 46% of global urea trade and approximately 45% of global sulfur exports. These are not niche commodities. Urea is the single most widely used nitrogen fertilizer on the planet. Sulfur is essential for processing phosphate rock into usable fertilizer. Without them, yields collapse. And the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres appointed a special envoy specifically to try to restore fertilizer movement through the strait because the situation has become a humanitarian concern, not just an economic one. The FAO's chief economist Maximo Torero warned that if high fertilizer prices persist, farmers will reduce inputs, plant less, or switch crops, and that the impact will hit food supply for the rest of 2026 and into 2027. And on top of the fertilizer crisis, diesel is at $5.40. Every single item in a grocery store arrived there on a truck that runs on diesel. Day-T Freight Analytics reported that fuel surcharges jumped from 44 cents to 60 cents per mile in just 2 weeks. Amazon announced a 3.5% logistics surcharge starting April 17th that will be passed directly to consumers. And grocery prices were already 24% above pre-pandemic levels before any of this started. The USDA projects another 3.1% increase this year at a minimum, and the UN projects global food prices could average 15 to 20% higher in the first half of 2026 if the strait stays closed. The World Food Program warned that 45 million additional people could be pushed into acute food insecurity, and Foreign Policy magazine published an article this week with a headline that I want you to really sit with. It said the Iran war and the Strait of Hormuz closure could create a global food crisis, not a price increase. A crisis. And the Carnegie Endowment wrote that even if the war ends tomorrow, the fertilizer supply cannot restart instantly. It takes weeks to rebuild the production and transport chain, and the planting season is already closing. Whatever was not planted this spring is not coming to your table this fall. A rancher in Texas said the fertilizer costs have already gone up dramatically, and they are being forced to make hard decisions with their cattle. If they cannot feed the cattle die. And that means less meat, less food to go around. A farmer in Iowa said she is losing $110 per acre this year because the price of corn does not cover what it costs to grow it. She checks the commodity market 6 times a day. Her farm has been in her family for 85 years, and she does not know if it will survive the year. This is what a food system under stress looks like. And most Americans will not feel it until they are standing in a grocery store looking at prices they cannot afford or shelves that are not fully stocked. But by then, it will already be too late to prepare. Consider this your warning, because what is coming is not just inflation, it is scarcity. And scarcity was never supposed to be a word we used to describe the United States of America. Every empire that looked like this fell, and none of them thought it would happen to them. I want to take a step back from the data for a moment. Not because the data is not important, it is the most important part. but because I think there is a larger pattern that most people cannot see when they are standing inside of it. And I want to show it to you, because once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The quantitative historian Peter Turchin, who spent decades studying why civilizations rise and collapse, identified a recurring cycle that is played out across every major society in recorded history. Ancient Egypt, Rome, China, Russia, all of them. The cycle goes like this. A society starts out relatively equal. Its population grows, labor becomes cheap, a wealthy elite class emerges, inequality widens, life for the working class deteriorates. The elite class fights among itself for power, and the lower class, miserable and disillusioned, eventually reaches a breaking point. Turchin found that this cycle runs on roughly a 200 to 300-year timeline, and he also found a shorter 50-year cycle within it, alternating between one peaceful generation and one turbulent generation. Looking at American history, he identified periods of serious instability in 1870, 1920, and 1970. In 2010, a full decade before it happened, he predicted that the United States would experience a period of major unrest around 2020 at least, on the level of 1970. He was right, and he warned that the United States was not the only Western nation showing the pattern. Now look at where we are. The top 1% of Americans control more wealth than the entire middle class combined. That is the exact same distribution that existed in late-stage Rome before the empire fractured. 90% of the nation's wealth is concentrated at the top, while the lower middle class holds roughly 3%. Trust in every major institution from Congress to the media to the courts is at historic lows. The government is running a deficit approaching $2 trillion a year, while spending more on debt interest than on defense. The military is overextended in a foreign war with no clear exit strategy while infrastructure at home crumbles. Working people are homeless, elderly people cannot retire, young people cannot afford to start their lives, and the political system is so paralyzed by polarization that it cannot respond to any of it. Every single one of those conditions has preceded the collapse of a major civilization. Rome, the Ottomans, the Soviet Union, pre-revolutionary France, the Spanish Empire, and none of them believed it would happen to them. Rome thought it was permanent. The British Empire thought it was exceptional. The Soviets thought their ideology made them invincible, and every single one of them had warning signs that look almost identical to what we are experiencing right now. Corruption at the top, loss of public trust, widening wealth gaps, social division, foreign conflicts draining the treasury, citizens too distracted or exhausted to resist, and a ruling class so insulated by wealth that they could not feel the ground shifting beneath them. I am not saying America is going to collapse tomorrow. I am saying that every society that ignored these warning signs paid for it. And right now we are not just ignoring them, we are accelerating them. The mathematician Safa Moteshere applied predator-prey models to human societies and found that either extreme inequality or resource depletion can trigger a collapse on its own. We are currently experiencing both at the same time, and civilizations, as the archaeologist Joseph Tainter documented, do not collapse in a day. They rot from within until one pressure event exposes the weakness, and then it accelerates fast. That is not a political opinion. That is a pattern that has repeated itself across 4,000 years of human history. And the only question left is whether we have the collective will to change course before we join the list. This was never supposed to happen here, and now you have to decide what to do about it. Everything we just went through in this video, every single number, every single story, every single warning sign, they all point to one conclusion. And it is the one thing that nobody in politics, nobody on cable news, nobody in your social media feed wants to say out loud. What is happening in America right now was never supposed to happen here. Working people were never supposed to be homeless. A 22-year-old making $21 an hour at Amazon was never supposed to sleep in the back seat of his mother's car with the family dog. A 67-year-old woman who worked retail for 33 years was never supposed to be laid off right before her pension kicked in and end up in a shelter. Workers over 50 were never supposed to be thrown out of the job market and told they are too old, while the Social Security they paid into their entire lives is 6 years from insolvency. The government was never supposed to be $39 trillion in debt, borrowing $308 billion in a single month while spending more on interest payments than on the entire military. You were never supposed to be paying $742 a month for a car, $2,205 for a mortgage, $4 for gas, and $5.40 for diesel, while your health insurance doubled overnight because Congress let the subsidies expire to pay for a tax cut. Your grocery bill was never supposed to be 24% higher than it was 5 years ago, with another 15 to 20% increase coming, because a war you did not vote for closed the single most important trade route on Earth during planting season. The refineries that process your fuel were never supposed to be incompatible with the oil you produce. The fertilizer that grows your food was never supposed to be held hostage by a conflict 6,000 miles away. And your children were never supposed to graduate from college carrying $94,000 in debt into a job market where AI is the #1 reason companies are firing people, and 42% of recent graduates cannot find a job that matches their degree. None of this was supposed to happen, and yet here we are. And the most dangerous thing you can do right now is pretend it is going to fix itself. It is not. There is no policy coming. There is no election that reverses all of this overnight. There is no cavalry. The people who built this system are not going to dismantle it because it is working exactly the way they designed it to work. It extracts wealth upward. It passes risk downward. It privatizes the gains and socializes the losses. And it depends on your exhaustion, your distraction, and your belief that someone else is going to handle it. Nobody is going to handle it. That is the truth. And once you accept that truth, you can actually start making decisions that protect you and your family instead of waiting for permission from a system that does not care whether you survive. So what do? You pay attention to what is actually happening instead of what they tell you is happening. You build skills that cannot be automated. You get out of high-interest debt as fast as you can. You start an emergency fund even if it is $25 a week. You talk to your family about money honestly. You know your neighbors. You strengthen your community. You stop waiting for things to go back to normal, because normal is not coming back. And you share what you learned today with someone who needs to hear it. Not because of the algorithm, because this is information that could change how someone plans the next year of their life. And that matters more than any view count. I genuinely believe that the people who are going to come through what is ahead are not the richest or the most connected. They are the most aware, the ones who stopped looking away, the ones who started preparing while everyone else was still arguing about politics. That is what this moment is really about. Not despair, awareness, and what you do with that awareness is up to you. Thank you for watching this all the way through. I know it was a lot. I know some of it was hard to hear, but I would rather tell you the truth than make you comfortable. And if this video meant something to you, share it, subscribe, turn on notifications, because this story is far from over, and I am going to keep telling it whether it is convenient or not. Take care of yourselves out there, take care of your families, strengthen your circle, and I will see you in the next one.